Welcome to Developing Roots in Community Real Estate, the podcast where we dive deep into the world of real estate development and its impact on the communities we live in. I'm your host, Jessica Washington, and I'm joined by my co-host, Ernest Williams. Thank you so much for joining us as we embark on another exciting journey that explores the intersection of bricks and mortar, people, and places. Whether you're a seasoned developer, an aspiring urban planner, or someone who cares about the places that they call home, this podcast is your window into the dynamic world of community transformation.
Real estate development is more than just the construction of buildings. It's about creating neighborhoods and crafting community, all to foster a connection and build a legacy for the upcoming generation. We hope this episode will offer inspiration and give insight into the various facets of community development.
Now, before we introduce our guests, we want to take a moment to thank our sponsor, Momentous Capital, and just let you know that this podcast is brought to you by the Diverse Developers Program in the D.C., Maryland, Virginia region through Capital Impact Partners. So thank you so much for our sponsors.
All right. So without further ado, we would like to introduce our guest, Courtney Battle. Courtney is the Executive Director for the Housing Association of Nonprofit Developers, or HAND. HAND's growing network of members includes a wide variety of real estate and community development professionals in the capital region who share the mission of creating more equitable outcomes through the vehicle of affordable housing. Courtney joined the organization in October 2016 as membership manager and has been promoted several times over the years, now serving as the executive director. In her various roles, she has been responsible for the recruitment and engagement of members, launching and administering the association management system, implementing the organization's marketing and communications initiatives, and the planning and execution of over 40 training and capacity building events each year. Outside of a professional life, Courtney has engaged with several community organizations, which include Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, Reading Partners, and Community One. She is currently a board member for Women of Color in Community Development and was president of the board from 2020 to 2021. She also successfully completed the Illuminate Your Leadership nonprofit coaching program and Prosperity Now's Building High Impact Nonprofits of Color initiative. She received her bachelor's degree from Howard University, where she majored in journalism and minored in Afro-American studies. She's originally from Southfield, Michigan, and has found a second home here in Washington, D.C. Welcome, Courtney.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. So let's get right into it. So first of all, just tell us a little bit about your background and how did you end up in this affordable housing and community development space?
Great question. So as you mentioned, I studied journalism at Howard here in DC, and for as long as I can remember, that was my career goal, to report and anchor on air. And somewhere along the way, had a little bit of a shift. So coming out of school, I worked at CNN for some time, and decided that my heart wasn't completely there in reporting and anchoring, and so wanted to still be able to leverage those communication skills, and moved over to the other side, to public relations and public affairs. Did that for a couple years, and that really allowed me to recognize that I wanted to get into more mission-oriented work. And so I was actually connected to Heather Raspberry, who was the executive director of HAND at the time. She's executive director emeritus now, and was able to take advantage of the opportunity for membership manager. So that's how I got into the space and how I was connected to HAND. And one thing I didn't mention, that I don't often mention, is that this is actually very full circle. Even before CNN, I actually was working in property management. And so it's a very full circle season for me. So that's how I got here. Yeah.
Very good. And so you talked about your want to move into mission based type of work. So could you tell us more about HAND's mission and the primary challenges HAND looks to work on in the DM?
Sure. So HAND is what we call a membership collective or a membership association for people and groups that are working in the affordable housing and community development space. So that is a very broad term, as you both know. So that can look like real estate developers, architects, property managers, government agencies, lenders, resident services providers, policy advocates, all of these different people and groups that are involved in the creation and preservation of affordable housing across our region. And so our geographic footprint covers D.C., Maryland, Northern Virginia, as far as Hampton and Richmond area, and then also as far as Baltimore. So pretty diverse membership network that we have, as well as a really broad geographic footprint as well.
Okay, so you were, prior to getting into HAND, you kind of went over your history and your background in the journalism space, and that's pretty fast-paced. There's always a lot of changes. How has that experience kind of helped you navigate, this new world of affordable housing, especially in the lead position as HAND? What kind of different, strategies have you taken away from that to help you in that role?
Sure. It's so funny how things work out. Coming out of school and pursuing journalism, this was the last kind of thing on my radar. And I think coming from that world, you're right, it's very fast-paced. Things are always changing. Every day is different. That has actually prepared me very well, I think, for this current space I'm in, because I tell people all the time, no day is different. I just came into this role in January as executive director, and so that in itself is just a huge transition. And truly, no day is different. It's an adventure. Every day engaging with members as well as different stakeholders, and really, just pursuing the work that is required to create more equitable outcomes in our communities. So I think it actually was great preparation. I didn't know it at the time, but
very good. And I can imagine it's been a whirlwind since, you've been newly minted in this role since January. But based on your view, what are some of the most critical factors you think that would have a determination, or would determine whether a community could thrive economically?
Thank you for the question. So I think that just to be frank, this feels like a comfortable space. I grew up in church. The first thing that came to mind when you asked that question was a Bible verse that actually speaks to, how you treat the least of these is how you treat me. And essentially what that saying is, how you are treating the most vulnerable in our communities is what really matters, right? And so I think about, how are we thinking about affordable housing? How are we thinking about our seniors, our children, those populations that need us the most? And what supports do we have in place for them? How are we thinking about race and how that impacts our communities, and, how we live in 2024, the systems that were created decades and decades ago. So that's what I would say. I think how we support the most vulnerable sectors or neighbors in our community is very telling about how healthy our communities are.
Amen. I really appreciate that. Thank you. So you all host at HAND a lot of different events and programming. I think in the bio you said over 40 events per year on average. So
to over 70.
Wow. I think I got it up late. So that's almost double. That's almost double now. So, as we host a lot of these different events and panels and whatnot, what are some of the most important themes you think it's important to talk about these days that are emerging within community development world?
Sure. I think, There were a lot of things that came out of the pandemic a few years ago, but I think racial equity continues to be top of mind for us. And even before the pandemic, we had really started to work with our members to center racial equity in all of our programming and activities. And once we saw the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and unfortunately so many others, that really allowed us to double down on that work. And so we're, internally with our board and staff, as well as externally, that's really top of mind for us, just thinking through that lens, how are we centering racial equity in all of the things that we do? And I think we can't talk about community development, affordable housing, any of this work without acknowledging that that's a thing. And for sure. And we can't, just put a Band-Aid over it. We have to address the systems that have created those outcomes in the first place.
Great. Said. So in addition to the programming that you referenced over 70 events now, is there any additional tools or any other additional things that HAND has that, you can offer the public and to try to help advance your mission?
Yeah. So in addition to the training and capacity building that we do, we also convene our members on a regular basis to help them build the relationships and partnerships that are so critical to this work. And then also we have what we call the activating side of our work. And that really speaks to the policy and advocacy. And the primary effort on that side of the shop is what we call the Housing Indicator Tool, or the HIT for short. And this is a digital platform that we launched in 2021. So this is the fourth installment of the tool that we just released. And essentially, it tracks our region's progress on affordable housing production, preservation, and the policies that are in place to support that production and preservation as well. And so you can go to the tool, you can see how your local jurisdiction is doing on these goals that were set by Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, or COG, as well as Urban Institute. And you can go in and see how our region is faring, work we still have to do, and ways that we can all get involved, whether you're a developer, a banker, or property manager. There's something for all of us to do to be able to advance on these goals.
Awesome. So we talked a lot about your role at HAND, but, as we read through your bio, there's a lot of different other organizations and initiatives that you're involved in. So talk about a little bit about yourself, life outside of HAND. What are your other interests, other initiatives, anything else that you want to talk about that you're especially passionate about?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a dog mom. I say that, sir. I'm very passionate about my dog. Her name is Charlie, and she's great.
What kind of dog is she?
She's a cockapoo, and she is one of my best friends. I'll also make a plug for a group that I sit on the board, as well as have served as the president, Women of Color in Community Development, or WICKED for short. And this is just a really dynamic group of women. If there are any women of color that are listening and looking for groups like HAND or WICKED to get involved with, I would highly recommend WICKED. It's intergenerational, which I love. So lots of opportunities for organic mentoring to happen. We host events throughout the year to really support the personal and professional development of women working in this space. So wanted to do a plug for WICKED. And then I would also plug an organization totally not unrelated to community development, but have volunteered for them. I started volunteering, I think, in 2012, 2013 or so, but an organization called Reading Partners, and they support literacy. And so essentially volunteers, go into schools and help tutor kids on their reading. And just a great organization if you're looking for ways to give back to your community, directly benefit and change a child's life. I can't say enough how rewarding it is for, myself as a volunteer, but also, again, you're changing a child's life by supporting them in their literacy. So
That is great to hear. As the father of a 10-year-old, I've done all the requisite studies. I found there was something along a study that said something along the lines of you can chart a person's course in life based on their level of literacy around third grade.
Yeah.
And so that's great to hear. And so you've had an interesting journey. You felt a calling to get into mission-based work. And so what advice would you have for someone who's trying to get into the nonprofit affordable housing space or just affordable housing in general?
Sure. I would just say, just as with any sector, not even housing, but I would say just start talking to people. If there are people that you know or see that are doing what you think you would like to do or have some sort of interest in, just start having those conversations, ask for informational interviews, and also do your research, because there's so many directions that you could go in this community development ecosystem, right? So whether that's real estate development or property management, getting to the resident services side, which is so important. So I would say just have lots of conversations. Don't be afraid to try different things. Shadowing is always a great option. Intern, opportunities, be looking out for those. But that's where I would start. And HAND actually has a career page on our website. So shameless plug for HAND. Our website is www.handhousing.org. And that's a great place to start if you're looking for opportunities in this space. And, we're updating that constantly. So that's
awesome. One last question I wanted to ask. We're here coming up on May 2024. So are there any upcoming events that people can come out to and meet Courtney involving HAND, or anything you want to share with us about something coming up for HAND?
Yes. So June 13th, we're hosting our annual fundraiser, what we call HAND Honors. If you're familiar with HAND, we used to call this the annual meeting and housing expo, but we've moved it to an evening event at the Kennedy Center. So very, chic and elevated, I'll say. But we have our Housing Achievement Awards, and we also award our Children's Essay Contest and our Generation HAND Scholarship, and lots of good networking, good food, good drink. So I would, absolutely recommend anyone that is in the space to attend if you're interested and just want to start making connections. It's a great way to network. But that is the evening of June 13th, and you can register on our website.
Awesome. Well, this was all our time for today. Really appreciate you, Courtney, for coming out and, sharing everything about your background and giving us just more information about HAND. It's a tremendous organization, and I would echo her sentiments. Any person or organization out there that's involved in affordable housing development within the DMV area, strongly urge you to get more involved with HAND. So wrapping it up here, thank you for joining us for another episode of Developing Roots in Community Real Estate. I'm again your host, Jessica Washington. This is my co-host, Ernest Williams. Really appreciate you for joining us, and we will see you next time.
Take care, everyone.